Welcome to Manager Tools. Today's topic, diffusing disagreements. Here we go. Mark, what do you do when someone, particularly a direct, right, disagrees with an idea that you've shared or a suggestion you've made to the group? What do you do?
Well, it's actually, believe it or not, for the high Ds who are listening and for you and I, it's actually a good idea to agree with them a little bit. And since Wendy's in the room with us, I'm sure she's like, what? He's suggesting it's okay to agree with the directs, because she is now shaking her head vigorously left and right. Surprisingly, yeah, because a large part of this is role power, and we have 4 simple recommendations. This is a really simple cast, but it is the start of a series or a theme we're going to come back to in the future. What I told you about at lunch today about
That's right.
friction and grease.
Folks, there is some good stuff coming, let me tell you.
Yeah. I'm amazed that more people don't do it in terms of the conflict that happens between creative tension and interpersonal tension in group work, but we'll come back to that. So we've got 4 recommendations. First, the first thing you do when a director disagrees with you is you use a word or a couple of words of agreement. Okay? And that's to diffuse the tension. The next thing you do, although it's a general guidance, is you use a conciliatory tone throughout the statement you make and potentially the question you ask. There's a big difference between saying, I agree, and I agree. Or whatever.
Whatever. Yes.
And the third thing you do is say thanks. And the fourth thing, in many cases, but not in all, often you end up asking a question. And it's super easy. It's almost a mantra that you repeat. It's a standard behavior when you're in a situation where ideas are floating around, or you suggest something, or you suggest an idea, or a direct suggests an idea that is in direct disagreement with you. That's an important moment. That creates interpersonal tension. And this is the way you solve it.
Good. Okay, so, the moment someone disagrees with you, particularly when you're the boss, right?
Right. That's the
key thing here,
The boss thing is what, and how many times have we said to people, Horseman's Law about the sign on their forehead, right? If you're a boss, you have a sign on your forehead. It says, watch out, I'm your boss, I could fire you. And people say, oh, no, my people get along with me. They get along great. No.
Folks, the sign is there. You can take actions and engage in behaviors that make it smaller, but it's always
never
there.
Goes away. And our proof of that is, raise your hand, folks, if you're in the audience listening right now, and you tell your boss everything. Of course you don't. No. You're much more open with your directs than you are with your boss. And you're not wrong for being that way. It's normal to have what amounts to a healthy respect for. Some of us turn it into fear, into significant fear, but most of us have a healthy respect for the power that our boss has. The mistake that we make is believing that our directs don't have that fear of us because we're a normal guy.
We're nice people.
Because we're not actually bosses. I'm actually a nice guy.
Yeah.
Well, what we say is, your directs don't think of you as a nice guy. And everybody says, oh no, I am. I say, I'm not saying you're not. I'm saying your directs don't think of you that way. Your directs think of you as their boss. And disagreements with the boss inherently have some tension associated with it.
And more tension than most bosses realize.
Yes, exactly.
And so the smart thing to do as a boss is to engage in behaviors to reduce the tension.
Yeah. And the best way to do that is use a word or a couple of words. And I have a couple of go-to phrases, short phrases that I use that signify or a phrase that signifies agreement. Okay? And you don't have to use different ones all the time. You can use the same ones all the time and teach your folks that when they disagree, they're going to get the same thing. And the same thing means it's okay to disagree with me.
That's right.
And I'm essentially honoring the process of disagreement, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Okay, so what are some of those phrases or words that you use?
So let's pretend, okay, I'll be the manager, you be the direct. I know, and troubling for you, but bear with me, okay? And
I quit.
Yeah, nice. You can't do that. No, you can't do that. It's indentured servitude, so you're in trouble. Yeah. And let's assume that we're in a meeting and we're talking about next steps we're going to take on a project that's stalled for whatever reason. And I say, well, I think we ought to go back to the drawing board. And you come back with something like, no, let's try.
We're doing the right thing. We need to add 2 or 3 more steps here, and we got this thing solved, boss.
Okay, that's one.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you don't know what I'm going to say next. I might say, let's talk about that.
Right.
Okay.
But in your head, you disagree with the statement I just made, and you said, okay.
I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
You disagreed with my statement. You disagreed.
I disagreed by saying okay?
No, I'm saying in your head, you had some disagreement with me, but you chose to lower the tension.
Yeah, actually, no, I would argue that's not true. I don't have any disagreement with you yet.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you yet. First of all, maybe you said something that disagrees with me. I'm not thinking that right now.
You're not there yet.
I'm just thinking two ideas that are different.
Okay.
Different is not disagreeing yet. Okay? Different isn't wrong. It's just, if different is wrong, then diversity is in trouble. And diversity is good. Diversity in almost everything is good. Okay? So I don't disagree yet. I may in fact come to disagree, and I think that's your point. You're thinking that I disagree with you. But at this point, let's assume I'm just brainstorming with you, right? Or we're just throwing out ideas. I say, well, I think we ought to do this. Well, most people know that their boss doesn't know every single detail, and some of the people who know details might say a better solution is one that's built on more accurate understanding of the facts, right?
And to be clear, saying okay in the beginning doesn't suggest that ultimately you're going to take my suggestion.
No,
or go
it's
my
not
way.
agree or disagree or anything else. It's just, okay. Literally what I'm saying
Isn't that inaccurate?
Okay.
Isn't that like leading the direct on?
Well,
Suggesting that
if you draw the conclusion that I'm agreeing with you because of okay, when in fact I don't mean that, I'm essentially honoring the process. I'm saying, well, okay, I am responsible for the communication, or I'm responsible for the utterance, and I'm ultimately responsible for the communication, even though you control the communication by what's in your head. But I'm not responsible for any possible outcome of my communication. That's impossible. And so if you choose to draw the conclusion that I hate you because of it, I'm like, well, okay, I don't hate you. Right? Now, I might choose to modify my behavior in the future, but look, all I said was okay. Right? Now, somebody's saying, are you agreeing with me? I would say, no, not necessarily. We got two ideas on the table. One is, I've said this, you said that. Both of them might be right. I don't know, right? I haven't said we are going to do X. And I know a lot of bosses who get dinged because they say, I think we ought to do X, and somebody else says, well, I think we ought to do Y. And the implication is when the boss says, I think we ought to do X,
there you go.
It means we're going to do X.
That's right.
And I know a lot of people, great bosses, who say, it doesn't mean that. When I mean we're going to do X, I'll say, we're doing X. Case closed. Everybody get on board. But, hey, what do you guys think about Project X? I think we need to go back to the drawing board. If a direct says to you, no, I don't think so, boss. I think we need to drive forward. I think we got a couple of stumbling blocks and we can meet them. I don't feel like that's a big problem. Now, the rest of the people in the room probably are thinking, whew, that guy just disagreed with the boss.
Yeah.
And they're saying disagree because the ideas are different. But they're not diametrically opposed, and because they're not diametrically opposed, we're not necessarily in disagreement. There's tension between the ideas, and in the room, too many of us bosses make the mistake of believing that just because the ideas are in tension doesn't mean we have interpersonal tension. In fact, almost everyone else in the room, directs, would say, uh-oh, there's tension. We have disagreement, which leads to tension. Yeah. Or wrongness or disagreement.
And as a boss, you can help that, alleviate that by saying, okay, what else?
So another one is good. I think it's good. If I have an idea and you have an idea, I think it's good. One of my favorite phrases is an idea is a dangerous thing if it's the only one you have. Right? So good. You think that. Does somebody else think something different? That would be good too. And I bet you if we have everybody on the table, we don't need to spend days, right? Depending upon the urgency of the situation, but good. Cool.
Awesome.
Right? So you could say, cool. I could say, makes sense. Because from where I sit, starting over again makes sense. From where you sit, pushing forward makes sense.
I can see where that makes sense.
Yeah. And you wouldn't say, I can see where that makes sense, because that takes too long. What we're trying to do right now is quickly diffuse the potential for, is this going to be...
Quickly.
Yeah. Are we going to have a discussion about the disagreement? Right? Because we're in disagreement. When in fact, we're not. We just have two ideas that have some tension between them. I could say, right, okay. I could say, sure. I could say, yeah. I could say, yes. I could say, all right. I could say, that's right. I mean, I can say black, you can say white, and I can say, that's right. Let's think of it this way. Let's honor the person for a second. Do we have directs who routinely say things that are just patently false? No.
No.
So The fact that somebody sees it differently, gosh, everybody talks about diversity all the time. Let's have a bunch of different ideas on the table. It's like what we talked about at lunch today, right? About collaboration. People say collaboration. They don't know what the heck they're talking about. And the fact is, collaboration means bringing different ideas to the table and working together to come up with the ideal solution, which may include parts of all ideas, or it may in fact only include one, because one, everybody goes, oh my gosh, that's the best idea by far.
Yeah.
Right? And that's collaborative, right? I think people say collaborative to mean everybody's going to feel good about everything that happens.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is, no, that's not the organization's mission to make everybody feel good.
Yeah, that's okay as long as you're comfortable with not getting the best solution.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just choose the first one.
Let's choose happiness over effective solutions.
Yeah. Now look, again, we're diffusing tension with these short phrases. Okay, good, makes sense, that's right, all right, yeah, you're sure, good. We're not saying that the other idea is better than ours. We're not even saying it's the best idea. We're not even agreeing that that idea should take precedence over ours. We're simply acknowledging that that idea is okay, all right, fine, good, better than no communication at all. We're essentially honoring the process of sharing an idea as opposed to immediately judging that idea. And what most people do, most managers do, most inefficient or ineffective managers do, is when there is a creative tension, in other words, two ideas on the table that in some part are different, they immediately judge. And of course, they tend to find the idea that they shared to be the one that's better, judgmentally.
Right. Now, this goes back, you alluded to it earlier, you actually stated it. We were talking about it today at lunch. Tension between ideas is good.
Good.
Right.
That's why we discuss things. It's why words like but and however and nevertheless exist in our vocabularies. You know, my dad used to say the definition of conflict is two human beings in the same county. And what he meant was conflict and tension are inevitable when people get together. And that tension has benefits. You know, the classic example is, you know, what happens when chocolate and peanut butter collide, right? Well, the tension causes Reese's peanut butter cups, which are pretty sublime. When you've been in a brainstorming session and someone else shares an idea which causes you to think of something you've never thought of, and therefore it ends up with a better result, you've experienced the value of diversity. Some people might call that collaboration, and the value of tension between ideas. The mental model of we must immediately judge the varying values of the different ideas in terms of potential outcomes is only one possible model. The other model is more ideas on the table are good, and if I reward or send a message of I like different ideas, I'll get more of them.
Yeah.
And if the stuff is hitting the fan, and I need everybody on board, and I don't get anybody else's ideas, and so my people end up implementing only my ideas, we're not going to get as good results. And you have to be really, really smart. I had an old boss who said once, you may be smarter than me, but you're not smarter than we.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe you are the smartest person on your team, but you're not smarter than everyone on your team put together in terms of the value of all the ideas they've come up with in all their lives. So let's have their ideas come forward. And too many of us don't realize the size of our sign and the tendency of that sign to suppress idea creation, ideation, whatever, you know, creative differences and so on.
Now, you're not saying, though, that tension between people always creates better ideas or results necessarily, right? The tension is not the cause of the better ideas.
Yeah, exactly. The issue here is the difference between creative tension and interpersonal tension, okay? We want tension between ideas, but tension between people can say, oh, well, tension between people creates better ideas. No, actually, it doesn't. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. It's the tension between ideas that creates better ideas. Some people feel the tension between ideas, and then that creates interpersonal tension. Some people don't at all. Mm-hmm. You and I argue all the time, and we don't feel any tension. Some people don't like tension. For some of them, tension causes them to be less creative. They withdraw. They believe that interpersonal harmony is so valuable that any disruption of it is bad. And the key for managers who are leading a discussion, even if it's just a two-person discussion, is to diffuse the interpersonal tension while honoring the creative tension.
Yeah.
And using a word of agreement very quickly, a short one, to send a quick message of let's take the judgment off the table. Let's not do some evaluation techniques and say his is better, hers is better. Oh, he's the boss. That's the trouble. So on. Using a word of agreement does that very, very quickly.
Yeah. Again, and the word's not enough, right? We talk about behavior. The words you say, how you say them is part of behavior, right? So if you go like, well, okay. Well, okay is kind of a positive word, but the way I just said it does not suggest goodness.
Yeah, there's a great bit in X-Files where I think Mulder says to Scully, I love you, and Scully says, yeah, sure, whatever. Right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Both positive words. Positive. Absolutely a negative intent, right? Like the old phrase, two negatives don't make a positive. Well, two positives don't make a negative. And then somebody says, yeah, sure, right? Well, that's a negative. Look, you not only have to say something that attempts to ameliorate the tension, you have to mean to ameliorate the tension. If you try to ameliorate the tension, to lower the tension, and then you say it without a conciliatory tone, you'll make it worse. You'll say, I'm going to play a game with you, which is, I'm going to say things that you should know I mean when in fact secretly you know I don't. And I want you to play with the hand puppet I'm holding in front of you rather than the person you know is going to judge you at the end of the
positive hand puppet.
Yeah, the positive hand puppet, exactly. If you say, well, okay, you're not helping at all. And folks, if you do that, and you say manager tools taught you that, Jack Reacher is going to come visit you. And he's not going to say anything, but you're going to feel it. So say it like you mean it. You can't fake this, folks. If you don't mean to reduce the tension with the words you say, if you're secretly trying to judge the idea, if you're secretly trying to put somebody down and send a subtle message about that, don't bother. It'll only make things worse. And by worse, we mean you getting less ideas and getting less communication from your team in the short run and in the long run.
Yeah. And not very good results.
Yeah. Now look, people ask me a lot about conciliatory tone. Okay. And it's a hard thing. I mean, you can go to a speech therapist and they can tell you, here's how to sound that way. Okay. But I've got a simple way that I teach managers and executives when I coach them. I say, pretend you're your boss. You're in a meeting with yourself, right? You as your direct, right? As his direct. And you've put out an idea to your boss and you get the sense from the words he says that he likes it, even though he doesn't say so. That's conciliatory, right? So have one of your buddies play you and you be the boss and have your buddy say something as if they were your direct and you practice saying, sure, okay.
Are you kidding me?
What do you mean?
You want me to actually practice this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to. I don't know.
Because I'm so good at it now.
I don't know. I mean, how many directs do you have and how good a boss do you want to be? You don't have to practice.
Yeah, folks, get over that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. People talk about, gee, it's amazing. You practice. I say, yeah. And people say, oh, you're a good presenter. I say, yeah.
I practice.
I practice. I stand in front of the windows in my house and I actually practice. I videotape myself. I audio tape myself. Wow, you've been doing this for 20 years. You're still doing that? No, I've been practicing for 20 years, and that's why I'm still a presenter after 20 years.
Amazing.
Cart before the horse. Yeah.
Okay, the last step, in many situations at least, say thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, again, this is a process step, not a content step. We're not evaluating content. In other words, you're saying, thanks for sharing an idea, any idea, because that's the process we're in right now. As opposed to saying, this is not you saying, thank you for that great idea. In other words, my thanks is for the value of your idea. And look, for some of your directs, folks, the lack of a thank you is seen as a tacit admission that you're not thankful for an idea that's different than yours. Remember now, this is all predicated on you put out an idea and somebody's either disagreed or somebody said, well, here's something else. This is different. Or I think we ought to do this. Okay. In fact, I think we ought to do this, if prefaced by, I'd like to suggest a different idea, is a lot less tension filled, right? If you say, I think we ought to do X, and one of your directs says, I think we ought to do Y, that increases the tension in that moment. If they say, well, okay, I've got a different idea, I think we ought to do this, that comes across as much less tension filled in that situation. But if they come across with an idea that's different than yours, and there's that perception for role power induced tension, and by the way, in some groups, it doesn't take role power to induce the tension. If you don't thank them, they think that you're highlighting the difference in ideas because they know that everyone in the room feels like somebody disagreed with the boss. And so we recommend thank you. So in other words, they're like, sure, okay, thanks. And again, this is honoring the process. Yeah. What we're trying to do is lower that tension level back to some semblance of what it was before a person said, I have a different idea than the boss. And I know, guys, there's a good percentage of you who says, wow, Mark is kind of a pain and I'm different. I'm special. I'm the one. Yeah. I'm totally the one. And it's all good. Well, I don't know if you know this, guys, but you weren't in the Matrix. You're not the one. And this probably applies to you.
Our next point. Often, in some cases, it's helpful to provide further distance in time, a little bit, from the moment of conflict with the boss by asking a question about the idea or the disagreement, right?
Yeah. The idea of asking a question is to focus on the other idea and to take time doing so people forget, or their heart rate goes back to normal, their blood pressure goes down a little bit, and they start focusing on the idea, the individual idea, rather than the conflict between the two ideas, which we would call creative tension.
Or the conflict between the two people. As a result,
there are some people who just the conflict between two ideas is enough for a conflict, right? There are some people who are naturally conflict averse, and they see any bump in the road as a significant conflict. High D's don't think conflict exists. It's just me grinding you down into dust, right? So when someone simply disagrees with you and says, I think you're wrong, or that doesn't make sense, right? You can say, okay, sure. And then you show some appreciation, like I just did, and acknowledge that it's different than yours. And what's interesting is it's valuable for that very reason that it's different than yours, and then express some interest in learning more about it. Okay? So it might sound like this, the entire thing. Okay, sure, thanks. Tell me more. Or, got it. Would you expand on that, please? Or, that makes sense. I get it, and help me understand that. Or, help me understand that? Not getting it. Or, okay, sure, and help me understand that. Or, would you please help me understand that? Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks, and would you please help me understand that?
Thanks and please, 2 good words.
Nothing, yeah, yes, please, thank you, my 4 favorite words strung together. And, hey, okay, would you please elaborate a little? Again, conciliatory tone, not help me understand that. ID goes, wow, I actually asked somebody else to explain something to me. That's really me being nice. Well, if you say, help me understand that, that's a bit of a stretch. People say he's trying to diffuse the interpersonal tension, even though there might in fact be creative tension. And again, guys, remember, there is interpersonal tension in the room, even if as a high D boss, you don't feel it. A little time taken and respect for ideas different than yours in terms of, and the way you show respect is asking to know more about it, okay, reduces the tension and increases the impression that creative tension is still good while lowering the interpersonal tension.
Yeah, and you might in fact find out something that changes your mind. Just saying.
Yeah, it's happened before to all of us.
That's it.
And that's it. Use a word of agreement, use a conciliatory tone, say thanks, and ask a question in many of the cases. And guys, the fact is disagreements are good because diversity of ideas produces better ideas. This kind of friction, as opposed to the harmony of everyone having the same ideas and so therefore everyone agreeing all the time and no one getting their feelings hurt, this kind of friction actually helps deliver more value. But that emotional friction that may come up because of creative tension can take a toll on some of your folks, especially when your role powers involves a boss. And these are the steps to take to get more benefit at less of the cost.
Yeah.
That's it.
Love it. Thanks, man.
You bet, partner.
We'll see you. Thanks, everyone. That's it. We'll see you next week. Have a great one. So long.